another way in that in the new building that you just came into and thought you were perfectly safe, you should have been checking for that, but no, it's okay. You've got time. They're not, they're still trying to find a way in downstairs. There couldn't possibly be one shimmying up the ladder on the side of the building and coming down the chimney flue. I don't know. I think if under the fight or flight response, if there's an immediate sense of danger, then there's an immediate sense of self-preservation going down or fighting for your life. But the moment that you have time to think about it, you're more likely to make that fatal mistake that you might have had time or may not have made if there's only one chance of making that mistake. And that's what mistake.
So let me clarify your point. So the point is, and y'all should feel free to chime in, otherwise we're just like a sort of like a PBS show. So I'm just standing over here. Right, thank you. So your point is that if they're slow moving, then you've got time to think, and that time to think is less, I just want to make sure I understand, is less scary or more scary?
The less, having more time is less scary because it gives you time to relax, just to sit there, and that's where they always make the mistake, and then later on they figure out, I should have. There's time not to be afraid. There's time to relax. But when there's people running at you and they're bleeding and they're screaming at you and they're clawing at you in full tilt and hanging onto your vehicle and trying to bang their way in, there's no time to worry about it. You're just
running.
You're just going.
You can't even plan.
Right.
So you don't have the option of making the wrong plan.
Right. You don't have the option at all. There's no time to make an option.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So you have a kind of choiceless choice. All you can do is run.
Right.
Okay. You are making my point for me. So.
I call it the trap.
So,
Give me a trap.
Have you heard of Phineas Gage?
Yeah.
Did you see hands?
There's the trap.
Okay, so Phineas Gage, you actually see his skull in the cabinet at the Harvard Medical School Library. He was a railroad worker back in 1848. I always forget the date. He had a bad day, basically, a really, really bad day. So he was the foreman. So remember, his job as the foreman was to keep control of everybody, to make sure that those guys on the railroad don't make their mistakes, okay? You guys got to stop eating, you guys got to go to bed, we got to put down your railroad tracks all through Cavendish from us, the Northeast Railroad can go through. He didn't clear the area, a stick of dynamite went off, the railroad spike went up, pierced him here, came out the top of his head here. Not only did he not die, he stayed conscious. So he was, what are you going to do? There's no antibiotics. They brought him to the doctor. The doctor did a very intelligent medical thing. He just took the thing out. What else are you going to do? So he pulled it out slowly. Phineas Gage stayed living, fought off infection, but was massively changed from that point forward. He was unable to control his impulses. So he lost the capacity for his frontal lobe to tell his limbic system, the fight or flight response, how to behave and when not to behave. So the equivalent would be whether where I live, there are an awful lot of opportunities to hang your middle finger out the window on the freeway because people drive like idiots in Boston. However, if you do that, hopefully your frontal lobe jumps in and says something like, that would be a bad idea, because it could be your boss, the guy could have a gun, you take your hands off the wheels, there's all sorts of reasons that you wouldn't want to do it. Phineas Gage lost that opportunity.
I'm just curious, is that a Harvard case?
So he was brought down from Vermont to Harvard and studied. It's not like they didn't know this, by the way. I mean, people had been suffering frontal brain injuries since there's been brains. And they knew that once folks got hit in the front part of their brain, whether or not there was a fracture that was going on, they lost the control for impulse.
Would you consider him a zombie then?
So it's a really, really interesting question. I think that's actually the next point I'm going to make. At what point do we draw the line? That's what I tried to write about in this book. At what point do we draw the line when we say that this thing that's animate, that has two legs, that walks, that eats, that seems to breathe, that engages in some kind of oxidative metabolism, at what point do we say it is no longer human, is the undead, is a zombie? And this is a question that's asked all the time, by the way, in medical circles. This is asked in philosophical circles about consciousness, things like that, and it's one of the most terrifying questions we can ask. Because we're basically saying, where do we draw the line on our own humanity, on what makes us human and what not? So I think the opportunity to think through those debates, to think through whether or not you've appropriately shuttered the windows right, whether or not you closed the chimney shaft correctly, whether or not you've done everything to possibly do that relentless set of chores that has to characterize the everyday life of the sole survivor in a perceived zombie apocalypse or an over zombie area. I think that would be the stuff that I do. I think that's just, to me, and this could just be a personal thing for me, this could be, to me, that's a ton more scary than seeing something chase me and running from it. The thought that, did I get it right? Did I not get it right? Can I relax now? Can I not relax now? Can I afford to go to sleep? Can I not? If I don't have the option of ever sleeping, then I just run till I can't run anymore. The idea of not knowing when I can stop, of having that frontal lobe work, Phineas Gage would know, but you, we know, right? Of not knowing when you can stop, to me, that's nightmarish.
Point of question, curiosity, Phineas Gage had a normal lifespan for the time?
He died a little bit earlier, but it wasn't any earlier than one would expect. I mean, it was within the range of normal.
Okay.
So you could, I believe he did die of an encephalopathic infection, but he lived a long time. The brain's actually an amazingly resilient organ. If you can take out an awful lot of the brain and still do an awful lot of things, so it's actually sort of the conceit for a lot of zombie stories. When we